billion a year, had used a fleet of borrowed, rented, and improvised drilling rigs to find the men and to feed them for 69 days. Now was the moment of truth. Could they pull the men to safety? From a depth more than twice as high as the Eiffel Tower? The rescue hole was so small that the miners had been instructed to exercise strenuously to make sure they would actually fit inside the capsule. Despite the early hour, hundreds of journalists were already awake, lugging camera equipment in an effort to reserve a privileged spot for a drama that had captured the hearts and imaginations of viewers worldwide. Not since the moon landing had a technical challenge so intrigued and captivated the world. And in 2010, the Wired World offered a dozen new devices for following and commenting on the proceedings. With their heads bowed toward a scorching mound of orange embers, testament to weeks of waiting, the Avalos family appeared oblivious to the growing commotion. They offered a few comments, then ignored the arrival of a stray cameraman. The journalist, with cables and soundman in tow, waded in for a few minutes of live broadcasting, every word transmitted to an audience around the world, and then migrated to the next family. Behind the Avalos family was the banner, "Buried perhaps, overcome never." The miners' faces stared out from the sign, half hidden in the dark. As individuals, their faces were unremarkable, serious, dour, and weathered. As a group, they were Los 33, a worldwide symbol of resilience. Throughout September and October 2010, as the rescuers drilled through a mountain of granite in search of the trapped men, the fate of Los 33 had become a collective narrative. The world's leading journalists flooded in, battling over scarce airline tickets to travel to Copiapó, a city so forgotten that when Chilean broadcasters delivered the national weather forecast, this was the only major city in Chile they simply skipped. "When the World Cup trophy toured all of Chile, they didn't stop here," groused Copiapó Mayor Magliosi Cardini, a ponytailed showman who looked like a backup rock and roll guitarist for ZZ Top. Despite the worldwide interest, the cameras were rarely allowed access to either the front lines or below the surface of this worldwide tragedy. Locked behind police lines by a strict and slick public relations campaign run by Chilean President Sebastián Piñera, most reporters were reduced to 2 months of interviewing family members and politicians, while a world audience measured in the hundreds of millions was transfixed by a more profound storyline. What was happening down below? Entombed in a sweltering, humid, and crumbling cave, how could 33 miners be alive after all these weeks? By early afternoon, the final countdown had begun. Crowds of relatives stood in awe as huge TV screens mounted on the side of motorhomes and on the flaps of the press tent showed images of the rescue workers putting the final touches on the Phoenix rescue capsule. Painted the colors of the Chilean flag, blue, white, and red, the Phoenix had been built on specifications developed by NASA and the Chilean Navy. At 11 p.m., the Phoenix was ready. A winch hoisted the capsule. A yellow wheel threaded the cable and slowly rotated. The scene was hypnotic. It looked like an industrial operation from the 1930s. Hidden from view were the modern tools that made the whole operation possible, including GPS units that allowed the massive drills to find a tiny underground target, miles of fiber optic cable and wireless transmitters that relayed the miner's pulse and blood pressure to a physician's laptop. 69 days earlier, the men had been lost underground. More than 2 weeks of searching had failed to find the tunnel where they were slowly starving to death. Death was so certain that the men had written goodbye letters. The government had even begun to design a white cross on the hillside to mark their tomb. Now, they might be reborn, resuscitated, and rescued. Could such an incredible feat actually be pulled off? As the world held its breath, the Phoenix was slowly lowered, and then it was gone. In a land of massive earthquakes, the number of ways for the rescue to fail were too numerous to calculate. In order to work, the rescue required not only precise engineering,